It is a blackout for Western Kentucky as they welcome in Marshall for the Conference USA opener. 1st and 10, the shuttle pass to Dean, inside the 5, touchdown! 3rd and 14 now. Duncan feeling the heat again, and he runs into a wall. Ryan B., the 5th-year senior from Ashland, Ohio. Back-to-back sacks to close out this possession. 1st and 25 now. Green rolling out. And intercepted! Deflected and taken away by DeAndre Ferris. Ferris with a convoy. Ferris inside the 20-yard line. Western Kentucky responds. Down 17-13 with under 2 minutes to play here in the Conference USA opener. Green over the middle. There's Brady inside the 10. Touchdown, Thundering Herd. Isaiah Green is down, but he just delivered the biggest throw of his young career.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Guys, it is the week that we have been waiting for. It is Moonshine Throwdown week, and boy, didn't this game turn into something really, really important these past few weeks. At the beginning of the season, we thought, yeah, this is going to be a fun game. Western's probably going to be rebuilding. We don't know exactly how competitive they're going to be. Marshall was getting a lot of the preseason pub, and we thought this will be a fun game. It's Herd homecoming. There'll be a good crowd and, you know, all that good stuff. But Western had a slow start, and then, man, they went on a tear. And now here they are, undefeated in conference, 4-0, first place in the Conference USA East. Marshall is 2-1 in the conference, staring up at Western Kentucky, and all of a sudden the Moonshine Throwdown's here, and this game could be a decisive game in the Conference USA East division, and ultimately may decide who's going to represent the East in the Conference USA Championship game. So this game has really turned into something that we didn't necessarily expect it would be some 2 months ago, yet here we are. And we are a little under, 36 hours-ish, 40 hours-ish away from kickoff, and we got a lot to talk about. We're going to get you caught up on the series of the Moonshine Throwdown and kind of how we got to this point now. Then we're going to talk some in-depth stats. We're going to cover a lot of bases. I'm going to talk to you a whole lot about a bunch of different players on both sides of this rivalry that you need to pay attention to. We're going to get some predictions. The guys are going to tell you what their team is going to have to do to get a win. And then they're going to tell you why their team is going to win. It's going to be an action-packed episode, chock full of stats, info, analysis, and maybe a little smack talk. Who knows? I mean, it is rivalry week, and that's what we're all about. So let me get into it. Of course, if you're not following us by now, I don't know. It's been a great week on the Moonshine TD account. A lot of folks have been interacting. We've picked up several, well, I don't want to say several, like dozens and dozens of new followers. I wish more folks would, hit that follow button because you're missing out on a lot of fun. There's been a lot of great videos posted. There's been a lot of great audio posted. Some good tidbits have been posted this week. I mean, it's just, people are excited, Trace, and I'm expecting a really, really fun time on Saturday. Tailgating is going to be a lot of fun. I'm planning on being on the lots very, very early. I'm going to make a day out of it for sure. So let's talk about the history here. The all-time record between Marshall and Western Kentucky is 6-4 in the favor of the Herd. But in the Moonshine Throwdown era, dating all the way back to 2014, it's 3-2 in favor of Western Kentucky. Western won those first three Moonshine Throwdown, 2014, 15, and 16, and then Marshall has followed suit, winning the last two, 2017 and 2018. So not only is there Conference USA East implications this year, the all-time series can draw even with a Herd victory, or Western can go up 2 if they manage to get the win. So speaking of 2014, unless you have lived under a rock, I doubt if you have followed this account for any amount of time or have talked to a Marshall fan for any amount of time, or a Western fan for any amount of time, really, that 2014 football game will be brought up. It was just quite honestly one of the most epic, awesome college football games ever played. Now, you're talking about a 67-66 overtime victory by Western Kentucky over a ranked, undefeated Marshall Thundering Herd who had eyes on a New Year's Six bid. Now, Marshall fans will tell you, that game really didn't mean much because we went on and won the conference anyway, and we went on to the Boca Raton Bowl and beat up an 11-win Northern Illinois MAC champion, and all of our goals were ultimately met. Well, still, being 1 point from perfection sticks in your craw. I don't care what you say. And it is no coincidence that a lot of the disdain that Herd fans hold for Western Kentucky, no matter what sport it is, results from that 2014 football game. That was Western's first year in Conference USA, Trace. They came in, they were 6-5 coming into that game. So why would Marshall think, this isn't going to be that tough? Well, 1,444 total combined yards of offense later, 15 combined touchdown passes later, it was a 67-66 overtime win for Western Kentucky with a walk-off 2-point conversion and the now infamous double-handed throat slash by then quarterback Brandon Doughty to the home side of the Joan C. Edwards Stadium, and all those Marshall fans who were stunned by the outcome of that game. As a matter of fact, Brandon Doughty still owns the single game Joan C. Edwards touchdown pass record. He threw 8 that day, outdueled Rakeem Cato, who threw 7. Just an unbelievably crazy, wild, awesome game. It's really a shame somebody had to win and somebody had to lose, because it was amazing the amount of offense that was played there. And there were some really good defensive plays as well. So anyway, I affectionately refer to that 2014 game as the one that started it all, because that double-handed throat slash by Brandon Doughty was, in fact, what I consider to be the birth moment of the Moonshine Throwdown as we know it. The very next season, Trace, 2015, the Big Red Machine on offense was in full swing. Western Kentucky was basically a juggernaut on offense, on their way to their first of 2 consecutive Conference USA championships. Yet both teams came into that game 9-2. The game took place in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And it was the upperclassman, 6th-year senior Brandon Doughty at quarterback against freshman quarterback Chase Litton. And the game went okay for the Herd. It's just they ran into one of the best offenses ever seen in a Conference USA, out of a Conference USA team. Final score 49-28. That was a big game for Western Kentucky tight end Tyler Higbee, who can now be found playing on Sundays for the Los Angeles Rams. He went for 92 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game, man. The Herd really had no answer for that tight end. But the thing that sticks out the most about that game to me was the fact that with roughly 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Western Kentucky had just scored a touchdown to go up 47-21, I believe. And Jeff Brom went for 2. And it was successful, much to the dismay of Herd fans in attendance. I was there at the game, and that was not well received. That was seen as a blatant show of disrespect. Now, Topper fans will tell you, oh, that's the smart play. You just go ahead and go for 2, and now you're up 4 scores. But look, Marshall had 21 points through 3 quarters and 3 minutes. There was no reason to think they were going to score another 28 points in the last 12 minutes, but still. So that game decided the Conference USA East, and that was something that became a little bit of a trend. I call that game the Bowling Green Massacre because there was something floating around in pop culture at that time called the Bowling Green Massacre, if you can remember. And, that game was just dominated by the Herd. I think, one of those touchdowns even came on a DeAndre Reeves punt return for touchdown or kick return for touchdown. I can't recall.
Kickoff, yeah.
Yeah, the offense was just, it was so-so. They were a good team. It's just Western was a lot better on offense. Then we come to the one that most Herd fans want to forget, Trace. 2016. We talk about that a lot because that was a real low point for the Herd. They were coming off of that 10-win season. They beat UConn the year before in the bowl game to get to 10-2. And they come back in 2016 and they post a 3-9 record. 3-8 coming into the Moonshine Throwdown. The game took place in Huntington, West Virginia. Western was 8-3, so mirror images of one another. The Tops were on their way, like I said earlier, to their second of back-to-back Conference USA championships. And the Toppers handed Marshall their single worst home loss ever. 60-6. A game that will not soon be forgotten, at least as long as a Topper fan draws breath and a Herd fan has ears. Essentially, this game was over after the opening kickoff because Western Kentucky kick returner Kylan Towner returned the opening kickoff for touchdown. The extra point was good, giving the Toppers 7. And for the remainder of the game, the Herd only scored 6. 2017, the Herd finally got it right, Trace. This is another unique game. Took place on Sacred Saturday for the Herd, and we all know how Marshall plays on Sacred Saturday. This was year one of the Mike Sanford era. Herd came in 6-3, Toppers 5-4. Pretty evenly matched teams. Marshall ended up winning the game 30-23, but once they went ahead 10-7, it really didn't feel like the game was in question. Now, 30-23 is not a large victory, but it just never felt like Western was going to take that game back over. And they really didn't. I mean, Marshall, every time they made a push, Marshall managed to stop them. They had a little bit of a run late, which is why the score was so close. The big play in that game to me was Najee Johnson had himself a pick 6 on Mike White for his first career interception as a collegiate athlete. That put the Herd up 27-10. And then the ensuing kickoff, Jaquan Yulee punched the ball out, and the Herd recovered. That really turned the tide of any real momentum that Western was mustering at that point. But you can tell by the score that they went on to score a couple more times. But it was ultimately a non-factor. Now we go to 2018. The game was in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and I was again in attendance. The Herd was 3-1 going in. Toppers 1-4. This was the Conference USA opener for both teams early in the season. Now, this was a good one. This was a back-and-forth game all game long. Isaiah Green was the quarterback now for the Herd. Stephen Duncan was the quarterback for the Tops. Both guys played pretty well. Isaiah Green had, I think, 3 interceptions in the game, but he was in his 5th start. He made plays when he needed to. The Herd goes up, with a minute and a half left in the fourth quarter. Isaiah Green finds Tyree Brady, who goes right into the end zone there to give the Herd the lead late. And then the Toppers take over. They're trying to drive, and then, we're getting under a minute, and Stephen Duncan finds a wide open Ja'Cour Pearson and hits him on a huge bomb to put the Toppers in the red zone with under a minute to go. And it looks like the Tops are going to go in and win this game. And they're headed towards the end zone to where I was standing, and I thought, man, we're going to have a front row seat to see this Topper victory. And senior defensive lineman Ryan B., an all-timer for the Herd, makes a phenomenal play to get a strip sack on Stephen Duncan. The fumble is recovered by the Herd to seal the victory. And that's how I sum up the game in 2018. I just call that one Ryan freaking B. And when you say that, everybody knows what you're talking about. That, to me, that is Ryan B's signature play in a Herd uniform to seal the win against a rival in a Conference USA opening game. It was a blackout for the Tops. They were up for that game. And it was a good crowd. And he made the play when he needed to. So here we stand, Moonshine Throwdown record 3-2. Herd looking for 3 straight, trying to match Western's 3 straight winning streak from 2014 to 2016. And the game's going to go down this Saturday, 10/26 at 2:30 p.m. Eastern at Jones C. Edwards Stadium in Huntington, West Virginia. I'm pumped, Trace. I know you're pumped. I know Steven's pumped. I know there are a lot of fans that are pumped up for this game. So before we get into any stats or anything like that, I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I've been talking for a second, and I want you to just give me a thought or two about, you've been around basically since the beginning of the Moonshine Throwdown. You've seen the progression. You've seen the intensity grow between the fan bases. Take off your podcast host hat for a second and put on your fan hat and talk to me from just a strictly fan perspective and tell me how you see or how you've seen this game progress, intensify, what it is. Has it gained in popularity and importance to you personally? Just from a win-loss perspective, is it one you've got to circle on the calendar now? Give me some feelings on how you feel about Western Kentucky and the Moonshine Throwdown.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely one that you circle. I think it's one that all the fans circle, and the players, if they actually circle games, or at least figuratively speaking, that's one that they circle, I think, for sure. I mean, it's like I said on the last episode we did earlier this week, a good rivalry or a great rivalry, no matter the circumstance of what the game actually means, the rivalry game always matters. It's always a big deal. And it doesn't matter anything else. And that's what this game has quickly developed into. I mean, if you just think about it, but it does help that all these games have pretty much meant something huge to an extent. I mean, the first game obviously ended an undefeated season. It was like a huge game people still talk about to this day. And then the year after that, it was the winner of the game won the Conference USA East Division, and that was on Black Friday. And, it was win or go home, essentially, in terms of winning the East Division. And then, of course, 2016 ended up being an all-time bad home loss and, all that. So in some way, that's a big deal of the game. And Western actually needed to win that game to make the conference title game because them and Old Dominion had the same conference record that year, but they had to head-to-head. So yeah, they had to beat Marshall in that game, which wasn't hard because Marshall was freaking pathetic that year, and they gave about as much effort as you and I sitting here staring at a screen right now. And then 2017, the Plane Crash anniversary game. That's a huge deal for Marshall every year, and that was the first time they had beaten Western in the Moonshine Throwdown era. Last year, like I said on the last episode, it was the Conference USA opener, so that's always a big deal because you never want to start out 0-1 in conference, and that kind of set the tone for the rest of the season for both teams because Western obviously had a miserable season and Marshall ended up winning 9 games, so that kind of helped launch a lot of that. So, a lot of these games, all of them really have meant something, and just from the first time that the teams were kind of butting heads there at midfield before the game kicked off in 2014, you pretty much knew that there was going to be something to build on there. And it's awesome to see how the fans and both respective fan bases have kind of rallied behind the rivalry and have really been interactive, and how everything surrounding the rivalry has grown and gotten bigger. And now people actually refer to it as a rivalry, and they refer to it as the Moonshine Throwdown, as was evident last year in the opening of the game, which is the opening of our podcast's intro, where the announcers called it the Moonshine Throwdown. So, that's a big deal because that's showing that on a relative national scale, if you want to call it that, it's really catching on as a rivalry game that has its own name and everything. So it's really grown. It's a big deal. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And this is another big game this year because the winner is going to be in first place in the East at the end of the day. So it's another big game that means a lot. And that's just what we've come to know and expect out of this rivalry. And it's here again. So let's see it.
Not only that, Trace, this is a new little wrinkle to the Moonshine Throwdown. It's homecoming for one of the teams. So every single year we've played, it's been something. And now it's homecoming. You don't generally schedule a rival for homecoming. And you don't generally schedule a team that could beat you for homecoming. Yet here we are.
Well, to be fair, though, I think preseason Marshall or most Marshall fans and Conference USA fans wouldn't think Western had much of a chance. So that's how the season's turned, though. That
may be true. Yet here we are. And, you know, this is a matchup of really two even teams, both living and dying by solid defensive play, making enough plays offensively to get the job done at times. And, you know, this may come down to who makes one more good offensive play or who has one more great defensive play. And we'll get into all of that here in a little bit. A matchup of two very even teams, Trace. I mean, the ESPN Power Index, though, they like the Herd a little bit here. 62.6% chance to win for the Herd. The Herd's currently, as we record, with less than 40 hours till kickoff, a 5.5-point favorite. Yet Western Kentucky's the one that's undefeated in conference, Trace. They're the one that's 4-0. But you got to think, well, if this game were in Bowling Green, maybe this spread, maybe this power index would be flip-flopped just the other way. I really think a lot of this has to do with the fact that the Herd's at home. But no matter how you slice it, they are 5.5-point favorites, and they're going to have to live up to that because they really got to get a win here. Try to own that tiebreaker against Western Kentucky. So let's look at a tail of the tape here, Trace. Let me give you some overall team statistics, and maybe we can get a little bit of an idea of what these teams may try to do to get their points. Western Kentucky and Marshall. Points per game. Western Kentucky is not really blowing the doors off by any means. They just scored 30 for the first time this past week against Charlotte for the Western Kentucky homecoming. On the season, they're scoring 22.3 points per game. Marshall's scoring just over 27 at 27.1. And points allowed, Western's a little bit stingier than the Herd is. Almost 11 points, almost 12 points actually. Western's only given up 17.9 points per game, and Marshall's given up 26.6. So the Herd's given up as much as they're scoring. And Western's about 5 points better than what they're giving up. Total yardage-wise, the Herd's almost 100 yards better per game offensively than the Toppers are. Western, 339 per game. Marshall, 434 per game. And you want to talk about balance, Trace. It don't get no more balance than the Herd offense. Passing, rushing, 217 yards each. Average on the season.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. Now the Toppers, they are about 100 and they more than double up their rushing yardage. They're good for 110 on the ground, 229 through the air. I don't know what that says when you're staring down the possibility of a 60% chance of rain, and upper 60s might be more of a run heavy game given the weather forecast. So that's got to favor the Herd a little bit, at least if Mother Nature holds par. Defensively, though, Western's about 100 yards better per game than Marshall is. Herd giving up 383 yards per game. Western just 287. Very stingy against the run. They're only giving up 110 yards on the ground. Marshall's giving up 135 on the ground. The big disparity, though, is passing yardage. Western's only giving up 177 yards per game through the air. The Herd almost 250, 248 yards per game. So, you look at the Herd defensive averages, you look at the Western Kentucky offensive averages, and they're pretty similar. It looks like what the Toppers do is what the Herd is not as good at defending. But just the opposite when you look at Western's defensive averages and Marshall's offensive averages. So it's intriguing to see how this defense can slow down Marshall, because Marshall has thrived on chunk plays. They don't put together long sustained drives. They'll have 2 or 3 3-and-outs real quick, and then they'll hit a 75-yard bomb. And then they'll come right back and hit a 59-yard catch and run, and then they'll go 3-and-out for 3 series. And then Brendan Knox will have 85 yards on a drive for a touchdown. Whereas the Toppers can hit the long play. They've scored on trick plays several times. They've put together sustained drives. They did that in their opening drive against Charlotte, 12 plays, 75 yards, over 7 minutes off the clock. That's the kind of thing that Marshall hasn't shown they've been able to do consistently. So it's really going to be an intriguing matchup between these two defenses and how they can contain and slow down the offenses. So let's talk about some players to look out for. I have a whole bevy of them. Generally, we bring you the quarterback, the leading rusher, the leading receiver, maybe a couple of guys, and maybe 1 or 2 guys on defense. I got a lot of guys for both teams because they need to know what they're up against here. And it occurred to me earlier that, I give you the names and the height and weight and all that kind of stuff and their stats, and that's all well and good. But when you're sitting in the stands, it's hard to read the back of a jersey. It's a lot easier to look at what number a dude is. So I've gone the extra step this week, and I've included the players' numbers for you folks so that when you say, hey, there's number 4, he was talking about number 4, you'll know who I'm talking about. So speaking of number 4, we're going to start with these players to look out for Western Kentucky. So Herd fans, perk up for a minute. It all starts with the quarterback, and we're talking about number 4, Ty Story, the 6'2", 225-pound graduate transfer senior. Spent last year, well, actually more than last year, but he came from Arkansas. He was a starter for Arkansas last year. Ton of SEC experience. Took over for the Toppers about 3-4 games ago, maybe, after Stephen Duncan went down with injury. And it's been a game of progression. Each week he's gotten better and better and better. And last week he had a little bit of a breakout game. And there are a lot of Topper fans that think this game is the one that he's really going to break out in a big way. On the season, 78 out of 112 passing, 805 yards, 5 touchdowns, just 1 interception. He does take care of the ball. Also has another 2 touchdowns on the ground. Running back, number 5, Gage Walker, the 6', 195-pound junior, 143 carries on the season, 628 yards, 4 touchdowns on the ground. Good for 4.4 yards per carry. Played secondary last year, Trace. Didn't play running back for the Toppers until week 1. He's been a nice surprise. When we did running back previews, I don't think we talked too much about Gage Walker. It was Garland. Well, I don't even know. Garland French moved to wide receiver. It was Joshua Samuel, and Gino Appleberry, a couple guys that had some yardage last year. We figured were going to be the guys this year, and it's been Gage Walker. Great surprise for this Herd offense, this Topper offense. He's really put up some good numbers. Starting with some wide receivers now. Number 11, the senior, Lucky Jackson. Big game last week against Charlotte. The 6'1", 185-pound senior. He's got 30 catches on the season, Trace, 404 yards. And he got his first touchdown of the season last week against Charlotte on that 69 yards flea flicker that went for touchdown. And then later in the game, he had a touchdown pass to Ty Story. One of my favorite guys to watch on this Hilltopper offense is number 7, Ja'Cour Pearson. He's 5'9", 180-pound junior, 40 catches on the season, 384 yards and 4 touchdowns. This is the guy that if you get the ball in open space, he's the one you probably will not be able to get down very easily. He's got the moves, he's got the speed, and he's got the knack to find the end zone. Dangerous player for this Hilltopper offense. And, of course, the big man now, tight end, freshman, Joshua Samuel, number 6, the 6'5", 235-pound freshman, 11 catches, 190 yards. And you're thinking, yeah, 11 catches, big deal. 4 of those 11 catches have gone for touchdown. And a matter of fact, he took one like 77 yards to the house earlier in the season. The kid can play. named to the FWAA preseason freshman midseason All-American watch list with Herd punt returner Talik Keaton the other day. So he can play. You better watch out for number 6. You better believe they're going to try to get him involved in this offense. Let's talk defense, Trace. Western Kentucky has the finest pass rusher in the conference this year, leading the league in sacks. Number 10, you better pay attention to number 10 when the Toppers are on defense. Number 10, D'Angelo Malone. 6'4", 230-pound junior, 58 tackles from his defensive end spot, 31 of those solo, 9 sacks. Trace, this guy can get after the quarterback. Number 36, linebacker, Kyle Bailey. 6', 225-pound junior, 57 tackles on the season, 32 of those solo. Hey, he's also picked up a couple of interceptions on the year. Very athletic guy. He can get sideline to sideline. Does a good job of getting in the backfield. Keep your eyes on number 36. He's a good one. One of my favorites, and he's been one of my favorites for a couple of years now. Burst on the scene to me as a freshman. Really got to like his style of play as a sophomore. And continue to enjoy how he plays the game this year. That's number 2, Devin Key. 6'1", 210-pound junior. He's a safety. 48 tackles, 22 of those solo, 2 passes defended on the season. I liken him somewhat to Malik Gant. He plays around the line of scrimmage a lot. He'll come up and get those hits around the line of scrimmage. Good, usually good for a tackle for loss here and there, and also plays equally well in coverage. One of the finer safeties in the conference. Doesn't get enough pub, but he's a good one. Number 31, a guy that's really come on this year, playing really solid for the Tops. Antoine Kincaid, defensive back, 5'11", 195-pound junior, 37 tackles this season, 21 of those solo, 2 passes defended. He's a hitter, man. He's got a nose for the ball, and he makes a lot of plays that don't necessarily go down in the stat book. And what I mean by that is quarterbacks don't throw his way a ton because he's really good at playing coverage. So his guy is generally blanketed pretty well. Depending on who lines up against number 31, may or may not have a pretty decent day. He's a pretty good corner. To me, the best all-around player on this Topper defense is number 15, Takorian Coco Darden, 5'9", 190-pound senior, 30 tackles, 18 of those solo, 1 interception, 2 passes defended. Now, this guy really plays everywhere, Trace. Everywhere the ball is, Coco Darden is not that far behind. A few weeks ago when the Toppers were playing UAB, you might have seen the clip. Herd fans might have seen the clip. He came in like a freaking heat-seeking missile and put a lick on that UAB running back. It's like ended up being like a 4-yard loss. And he's coming from basically a nickel spot, and sent that dude out of the game. I mean, Coco lays the lumber, and he can also play coverage. Keep your eyes on number 15. Last guy we're going to talk about for the Tops, special teamer, number 46, the freshman kicker, Corey Munson. I mean, heck, this time last year, I said it last week during the podcast, this time last year he was in high school. And he's kicking as a true freshman, and he's been kicking since week 1. Pretty good. 6'3", 185-pounder, 10 of 16 on field goals, 18 of 18 on extra points. He hit his career long last week, 48 yards, man. True freshman, 48 yards. If the Toppers need some clutch points, Corey Munson's pretty good. You like your chances of getting those points than not. So they really got themselves a good get when Corey Munson committed, and it's proven that now 10 of 16 on field goals, perfect on extra points. Now, I know you pay attention to these guys, Trace, and, because you're on the podcast. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but if you had to tell me one guy offensively of the guys that I just named, or maybe it's another guy that I didn't name, Who concerns you the most, would you say, on this Hilltopper offense? I mean, you listen week to week. I know you don't just zone out.
Yeah.
So who's the guy that you think, yeah, he could be a problem?
Well, I mean, I think it's just been the guy that's been a problem for the last several years, Lucky Jackson. I mean, he's just one. That's what Doc said in his press conference this week. He said he feels like Lucky Jackson's been there for like 7 or 8 years, and it really feels like he's been there that long. Like the guy's just every year he's one of the top, receiving threats considered in Conference USA. He's always one of their best players. And with Marshall's secondary this year, how it's pretty iffy, he could go deep a couple times maybe. I mean, I know the weather is supposed to be kind of iffy with rain or whatever, but so that might not lend itself to a big passing expedition. But he definitely seems like he's always in the picture. He's always making plays, and the guy you have to know where he is on the field at all times, especially for a Marshall secondary that's more times than I would like to have seen has kind of been lit up this year so far. So, I mean, that don't mean that I don't think they're a bad unit or anything. It's just there's a lot of inconsistency. They've had some injuries. Chris Jackson's been out for at least 2 or 3 games this year, and they've had some stuff, obviously, with a certain safety that's off the team now we won't talk about, and all that kind of stuff. So you just never really know what you're going to get with them, so that could lend itself for Lucky Jackson having a big game against them. Even in the weather conditions that they're projecting. So I think he's definitely somebody that could do some damage on Saturday.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, we saw him score on that trick play, so it doesn't necessarily take an 8-catch, 130-yard effort to make the difference. It could be one busted coverage or one trick play away that gets you the touchdown that you need to make a difference. But
he's kind of like Tommy Schuler, consistent sort of.
Yeah,
like Tommy
you are right. For Herd fans, he's a chain mover, but he's also a threat to go deep. It's a good pick there for pay attention, pay a little extra attention to number 11 if you're a Herd fan. So, all right, Tops, we're going to talk about some of these Herd players now, and there's a bunch of them that you need to pay attention to. And, of course, it starts with number 17, quarterback Isaiah Green. He's already 1-0 in the Moonshine Throwdown, so he's got that experience. He went in and, played some clutch football last year in Bowling Green. He put the Herd ahead when he needed to late in the fourth quarter. And we've seen flashes of greatness from Isaiah Green, but we've also seen flashes of, I don't want to say not greatness, but we've seen some things that make you wonder, wow. He's very up and down, very hot and cold. So we'll see how he responds this year in the Moonshine Throwdown. But number 17, the 6'2", 207-pound sophomore, 114 out of 197 on the season, 1,377 yards, 10 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Also, 63 carries, 247 yards rushing, and 1 touchdown on the ground. I like that emerging run game that Isaiah Green has been working on this year. If he can get that going, rainy, nasty conditions, that will probably be beneficial. And I should mention that Ty Story is also a threat to run, Herd fans. So, we've seen how mobile quarterbacks have had success against this Herd defense. So I just wanted to toss that out there. He is a threat to run. I wouldn't consider him a, quote, dual threat quarterback, Ty Story anyway, but he will cut one loose on you if he has to. Moving along here for the Herd, number 20. Needs no introduction, Trace. Number 20, running back Brendan Knox, the 6', 220-pound sophomore, 118 carries on the season, 719 yards, and 7 touchdowns on the ground. Good for 6.1 yards per carry, fresh off of a career-high rushing performance against Florida Atlantic last week, 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. Reigning Conference USA Offensive Player of the Week. There's just not a lot that goes unsaid about Brendan Knox. He's special. He may be the best running back in the conference, and I don't say that biasedly. He is legitimately possibly the best running back in the conference, and there are some good ones in this conference. Receivers you need to look out for, actually more so tight ends for this Herd team than receivers. Number 15, Topper fans, Armani Levias, tight end, 6'4", 255-pound senior, 22 catches this season, 269 yards, and 2 touchdowns, good for 12.2 yards per reception as a tight end. He's taken one 75 yards to the house. I think he's taken one 59 yards to the house. He runs good routes. I tweeted that he's got soft hands. I mean, he just makes plays. So he's one you definitely going to have to account for, because if you don't account for him, he will kill this defense. Number 1, Willie Johnson, the speedster, 6 foot, 180-pound junior. He's only got 8 catches on the year, but 205 yards, and 2 of those 8 catches have gone for touchdown. That's good for 25.6 yards per catch, Trace. That's a little eye-popping.
Yeah.
Willie's a little inconsistent. We saw that in the FAU game. He dropped a big reception, but then turned right around and caught a 60-yard bomb for touchdown. So that's the story of this Herd offense. They are very, very hot or very, very cold, but Willie's one you're going to pay attention to, because if he catches the ball and he's in space, very much like Ja'Cour Pearson, it's going to be hard to chase him down. And I don't know if there's anybody on this defense that can catch Willie Johnson if he gets past you. Number 11, he's a favorite here by Trace Johnson. Xavier Gaines, the other tight end. Well, I should say the second of 3, but we're only talking about 2. Xavier Gaines, the 6'3", 221-pound junior, 20 catches for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns this season, 8 rushes for 80 yards and a touchdown this season. Hey, he's 1 of 2 passing for 33 yards and a near touchdown this season. He is, no pun intended, the X factor. He could do any number of things to slash a defense. He's a legitimate threat to run, throw, and catch. Let's talk about some defensive players, Trace. Number 4, Tavonte Beckett, 5'10", 209-pound junior, 65 tackles this season, 24 of those solo, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, and a pass defended. One of the best linebackers in Conference USA. He's a Virginia Tech transfer, and he has got a nose for the ball, man. He is in on play after play after play. You can tell through 7 games, 65 tackles, he's almost good for 10 tackles a game. I mean, it tells you he's sniffing around the ball. Number 31, Amari Cobb, the senior. He's been there for a long time. 6'4", 223-pounder, 57 tackles, 27 of those solo, 1.5 sacks, a forced fumble, an interception, and a pass defended. Another playmaker. Marshall always has playmaking linebackers. They had them last year, and they've got them this year. Amari Cobb is a daggone good one. You can't teach 6'4", and that's kind of rare in a linebacker, but yet Marshall's got one patrolling in the second level. Number 13, Najee Johnson, the 5'10", 190-pound junior, defensive back, 48 tackles, 29 solo, 3 passes defended. I mean, Herd defensive backs, they only have 1 interception as a unit, and that came last week as they closed the game out against FAU. So it's not a surprising, eye-popping stat that a lot of them don't have interceptions because, well, only one of them does. But Najee makes a lot of plays. He's a pretty good cover man as well. But this Herd pass defense, if there is a question mark on this team, that's where it falls. Now, I wrote down 3 other guys, and all I did was write their numbers and names, and the reason I did that is because these are the 3 guys that account for a lot of sacks. So I don't have every other stat for them, but Western Kentucky fans do need to know about these 4 guys, or these 3 guys as well. Number 32, Tyler Brown, 4 sacks this season. Number 44, Darius Hodge, 6 sacks this season. And number 94, defensive lineman Channing Hames, 2.5 sacks this season. So those 3 guys alone counting for 12.5 sacks. you better know where number 32, 44, and 94 are at all times. One special teamer to talk about, number 16, Justin Rowasser, the 6'3", 230-pound senior, perfect on the season from field goals, 7 of 7 with a long of 45, and 21 out of 22 on extra points. That's a lot of guys, a lot of stats, and a lot of measurables. But hey, you guys need to know where these guys are in order to know what's going on. The only thing that we know of note right now for the Herd is what Trace mentioned earlier. Safety Brandon Drayton will not be playing for the Herd. He was the Marshall defense's fourth leading tackler. He's tied up in a little bit of a legal issue right now, which, we don't really talk about, but it is out there in the public. If you're so inclined to learn about it, you can learn about it, but that's not for us to talk about. So we won't. Trace, until we can get Steven in here, he's coming, folks. I know you keep hearing me say Trace this, Trace that, and I haven't talked to Steven. Steven's running a little bit late as per the norm, but it's not a big deal. So we'll talk to Moff about some of this stuff later on as well. But if you were a Topper fan, Trace, who is it that scares you the most offensively or defensively on this Herd team? Who is it that you're thinking, yeah, this is the guy that could light us up if we're not careful?
No, Brendan Knox for sure. When Brendan Knox is out there playing like he can play, and then the offensive line's doing what they can do, I mean, we saw how good he can be. He's only played, I would say, as a starting caliber running back at Marshall. He's only probably played in about 9 or 10 games maybe, and he's already got 2 games of over 200 yards. And many games over 100, around 150. I mean, the guy's just a stud. I mean, there's no other way around it. And whenever Marshall lost Tyler King earlier this year, a lot of people thought that, the running back unit would take a big hit because obviously King was a really good player too. But I think now Knox has proven he's clearly the better of the two. No disrespect to Tyler King because was a great player at Marshall at times. But, I mean, Brendan Knox, he is something special. I mean, he kind of runs tough. He runs really determined, and that FAU game, he broke so many tackles. I mean, for a guy of relatively small stature, all things considered, he's a really tough runner that can carry guys and can get through a lot of predicaments that a lot of running backs his size couldn't get through. So I think Knox for sure. I mean, especially like we keep talking about the potential weather, like the rain and everything. In a rainy kind of game, that lends itself to the running game really getting going. And I think that Western Kentucky D-line that's really heralded this year is going to get a huge test because Marshall O-line, we know how they can play and how they're capable of playing and all the experience they have. And if they can start moving the people around and opening up holes for Brendan Knox could have a huge game. And I think that would be the best thing for Marshall to win the game as if he gets going because, I mean, we saw what he did against FAU, 220 yards, just an unbelievable game. We saw what he did in the other games this year. So definitely you got to look for Brendan Knox. There's no other way around it. If he gets going, Western's in trouble.
Yeah, I was just looking at the stats while you were talking there, and he's almost at 1,300 career rushing yards, and you said it's probably only 10, maybe 11 games in his career. We didn't see him on the field until the second half of the season last year. So
the Charlotte game.
Yeah, and he only played in the first half of the bowl game, and he was almost at 100 yards then before he went out with injury. So he's definitely the one that can light you up. So you talked about matchup. Let's talk about that. What are your most intriguing games within the game for the 2019 Moonshine Throwdown? I've got a couple. I know I know Moff has a couple that he's probably intrigued. I'm curious as if we are all like-minded with where we're at. So what are your most intriguing matchups here, so to speak, for the 2019 Moonshine Throwdown?
Well, I think I just alluded to it. I think we both already alluded to it. I think it's the Marshall offensive line against the Western defensive line. I mean, I think that's a really fascinating matchup because, I mean, looking at it, Western's D-line has been really good this year. I think in that article that came out for Power Rack, I think you put that you thought they were the best D-line in Conference USA, I believe. Yeah. And you can make the argument that they have been that so far. And then if you look at Marshall's offensive line, you know what they're capable of. They've shown it many times. I mean, They're good at protecting Isaiah Green. When they're run blocking well, we saw how Brendan Knox can get off for 200 plus yards. So I mean, I think this is a fascinating matchup, and I think it could ultimately determine who wins the game. If Marshall's O-line wins, the line of scrimmage compared to Western's D-line, Marshall's in great shape. But if Western's D-line wins compared to Marshall's O-line, then Western's probably in great shape too. So I think that's a huge one for sure. And sitting here thinking about some other matchups, this is going to be one that could be a big one for Marshall. Marshall's secondary, just corners and safeties both against Western's receiving targets. I don't know. Receivers and tight ends, I guess, both bundled in there because like I said a little bit ago, Marshall's secondary has had issues at times this year. We saw that against FAU. We've seen that against Cincinnati and a bunch of different people. Marshall's secondary has struggled on and off. So I think if their secondary has a solid game, if they manage the Western receivers well, I think that bodes itself to really good things for Marshall's defense because if they can take away Western's pass, then I think they have a great shot at winning the game because, I mean, really, Western's it looks like they got a pretty good run game, but Marshall's been doing really good overall in the last couple games. That's another underrated part of the last two wins for Marshall is they've held teams to really low rushing yards, kind of similar to what it was last year when they were really good against the run. So if they can take away Western's pass and control those receiving targets, then I think Marshall's got a great chance to win the game.
Well, it's probably no surprise that you wrote down as the best matchups or your most intriguing matchups are my exact two best matchups. The Herd offensive line versus the Topper defensive line. Of course, the big question mark held over from the Topper homecoming game is, will the starting defensive tackles, Jeremy Darvin, LaShawn Terrell, be able to play against Marshall? Are they back? I don't know. I haven't heard. If they're not back, man, that is a big plus in the favor of the Herd because those two guys, they complement D'Angelo Malone and Juwan Jones so well. They allow them to do what they do from the defensive end position because they're so good on the interior line. And if they're not there, there's a bit of a drop-off talent-wise up the middle of this Topper defense, which forces those linebackers to have to make more plays and creep up a little bit more. And if Jeremy Darvin and Terrell aren't there, I got to tell you, I like the chances that Levi Brown and Kane Madden and Alex Millette and Ulmer and Josh Ball and every other lineman that the Herd's going to have in potentially a wet football game. I like their chances of moving the line of scrimmage positively every time the ball gets snapped. Now, it's going to be a different ball game if the Toppers are at full strength along the defensive line because, yeah, I did say they're the best defensive line in Conference USA, and I believe that because the stats have proven it. And if you've watched any of the games, they pass the eye test. So it's not just fluff. They're backing up those claims. But that is by far the most intriguing matchup. And just to toss the weather on top of it makes it that much more important.
Yeah.
And if it's a little bit wet, but, not a big deal. If it's not raining during the game time and the field drains and all that then the Topper wide receivers against the Herd secondary becomes an even bigger matchup because Chris Jackson didn't play against Florida Atlantic. We don't know if he's going to be back for the Moonshine Throwdown. We already know that the Herd is down its fourth leading tackler in safety Brandon Drayton, so they're already going to be shorthanded. This unit has given up yards. It's well documented. They're giving up passing yardage. And to not be at full strength, not even be close to being at full strength, if you get any type of halfway decent passing conditions, this really favors Western Kentucky. And then you're looking at strength on strength. You're looking at what kind of game is this going to be? Is it going to be a ball control game from a Herd perspective? Or is it going to be more of a attempted quick strike game from the Toppers perspective? Because we know they can slow it down and have a sustained methodical drive. We haven't seen that a whole bunch from the Herd. I'm uber excited to see how this game plays out. And I don't want to put too much emphasis on the weather. It's just, we haven't seen really rainy game yet this season for either team. So who knows who's going to play better. But I love these two matchups. I think these are so intriguing. Any other year, it just seems like it isn't apparent as much as it is this year. It's the O-line, herd O-line versus the topper defensive line, and the topper wide receivers against the herd secondary. That, to me, whoever wins those two battles, if the herd manages to beat the defensive line of Western and can hang with or basically nullify to a certain extent that passing game of the toppers, this is a herd victory. If the herd can't get any movement along the defensive front of Western Kentucky and they're giving up plays to these wide receivers, forget about it. This is a topper victory all day long. And depending on who you talk to, a lot of folks think Western's going to come in and have their way with the herd anyway. And if you're talking to some Marshall fans, see, you gave me a pfft, then that means you think that it's not necessarily going to be that way. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I don't think you think this is going to be a 3-touchdown victory for the herd, but I don't think you're thinking it's accurate that the toppers are going to come in here and, quote, have their way with the herd.
Nope.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So let's take a little bit of a break here, Trace. We'll come back here and we'll start diving into what we got to do for each of these teams to get a win. So hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
There is pressure. Dowdy. Deep leaping grab in the back of the end zone. Touchdown! Wow. Jared Dangerfield, 25 yards. How did he do it?
James Rouse on the play, but Dowdy puts the ball up and Dangerfield climbs the ladder, reels it in with a highlight type play.
All right, we're back. It's time to start talking specifics, Trey. Steven's going to get in here in a minute, and we're going to get some perspective from him. But right now, we're going to talk about what you think and what I think Marshall is going to have to do to get this win over Western Kentucky. And then you're going to answer me that one question, exactly why the herd will win. And usually we give our listeners 4 points, 4 things that the toppers or the herd need to do to get a win. Well, this week we're going to up the ante a little bit. I want 6 points from you, and I've got 6 points. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper, just give them a little bit more because, well, they deserve it for sitting through. We're sitting here almost 45 minutes, 50 minutes in, and we are cruising. So let's talk about it, Trace. Give me your reasons. Give me your points, your keys to victory for the herd. And we're getting specific, folks. You're not getting gypped here. It's none of those no turnovers, keep the penalties low. No. We're getting true keys to victory. So, Trace, lay it on them.
Oh, well, number 1 point, you got 4 more points. No, I'm just kidding. No, just kidding on that one. But that does apply. My first point, though, I wrote down is, now I ended up specifying, but at first I wrote down stop the run, but then I specified to hold them under 100 yards rushing as a team. That's what I'm going with for that. I think that would be huge because Marshall, when they've been able to slow down the team's rushing attacks this year, they have shown that they can have a lot of success defensively. I mean, the last 2 games that they've won, played against Old Dominion and FAU, they've held the opposing teams to under 100 yards both times. Old Dominion had in the 80s in total yards rushing. FAU had like 57 total yards rushing. So, and there's no coincidence that Marshall won both of those games because they were able to take one of their facets away offensively. So even though the secondary was getting burned a lot against FAU, it wasn't as big of a deal because they weren't having any success running the ball. So if Marshall can do that again in this one, then I like their chances because Ty Story's a good quarterback, I think, but there's nothing really, to be honest, there's nothing that really impresses me. Or not impresses me, but he's not overly glorified and he's not overly flashy. He's kind of like a game manager, which is nothing wrong with that because, at times I'd rather see Isaiah Green be more of a game manager instead of turning the ball over a bunch. So, if they can hold Western to under 100 yards rushing, I like their chances a lot. Next point is, I think Marshall's got to be 100% in the red zone. They have to score every single time they're in the red zone. That's what if it's field goals if there's some field goals involved, then that's fine. But preferably touchdowns, of course, but you have to be 100% in the red zone, I think, because Marshall's had a problem with that this year. I don't remember which game it was, a couple games that they really struggled in the red zone. And they ultimately, I think, cost them a game or two. So you got to be able to convert when you get down there. There's no other way around it. Points are going to be at a premium in this game. I don't think it's going to be a real high scoring game. So I think the more points, every point matters. So 100% in the red zone. Let's hope for that for Marshall. And then my next point is, I think you've got to feed Brendan Knox to the tune of 20 plus touches. That's what I put, 20 plus touches. And that might not all be running, but that could be a mixture, like maybe 17 carries, and then 3 or 4 catches or something like that. It's got to be at least 20 touches, I think, because every game that he's had a lot of, touches and runs and carries, the Marshall's had success. I mean, look what he just did against FAU. Look what he's done a couple other games. And like I keep thinking about that Boise State game, he had 70 some yards rushing and only had 10 carries. So he needed more carries in that game, and Marshall could have had a chance to win that one. So I think his involvement in the offense is crucial. I mean, there's no other way around it. I think he has to have a lot of touches in this game for Marshall to have good chance to win. Then my next point is, got to win the line of scrimmage. This is going to be a battle of, some tough guys out there, both sides. It's going to be kind of one of those gritty, tough, ugly games, I think. Not ugly necessarily of how the game's being played. I mean, it could be, but I think it's going to be just an old-fashioned kind of, I don't know, I don't want to label it like a Big Ten game or anything, but kind of just rugged and old school kind of game. I think it's going to be a lot of that. I think Marshall's O-line and D-line's got to play well. I mean, that's the trenches. I mean, Marshall won the trenches, dominated the trenches against FAU, and they won the game. So they can do that again in this one. I like their chances for sure. Next point is, I think Marshall's going to have big games from the tight ends because we know the issues at receiver. Brock Thompson's been out, Artie Henry's out, Obialo's out. I mean, a lot of crap going on with receivers, injuries and limited playing time and young guys and just a lot of kind of turmoil might not be the right word, but a lot of stuff going on with the receiving unit. And that shows how important the tight ends become. I mean, last week against FAU, they had 3 tight ends in the game at a lot of times during that game. And obviously Armani Levias is their leading receiver as a tight end. So I think you got to have big games from the tight ends because you don't know. I don't know if Brock Thompson's going to be back. I don't know. Gamage doesn't play a whole lot anymore for some reason. Willie Johnson's inconsistent, so I don't know what those receivers are going to give me. So tight ends got to have a good game, I think. Miller, Gaines, Levias, they all got to play well. At least, not that they all have to have massive games, but they all got to contribute. Fine contributions for sure. And then my last point is, this one's sort of vague, but not. I think it's very crucial. I think you got to win the time of possession because I've seen a lot of games this year where Marshall's been really low in time of possession. I mean, they were minus 20 minutes against Boise State. They were really, really poor in time of possession. I mean, when your defense is out there too long, they're going to give up more points than they should. It just goes without saying. And then if your offense isn't on the field enough, then you're not going to score as many points as you think you should. So it kind of just goes, it's kind of basic stuff, but I mean, Marshall's got to win the time of possession. I mean, if I was going to put a number on it, as far as how much they would have to win it by, I would say they need to win it by 5 to 10 minutes. That would be good, I think. And of course, more would be better, but I think you got to win it for sure. If you're minus 10 or minus whatever in time of possession, that's bad news, I think. So that's a big one there, I think, too. Under kind of a more under the radar kind of point that could be a big difference at the end of the day.
Well, those are all great points right off the bat. And you know that when I give my points, I like to have some specific things, and then I like to have kind of a team concept kind of point to make as well. My number one point for the Herd to get a win in this game is Brendan Knox is going to have to go over 125 yards, and I think he's going to have to find the end zone at least twice. Mm-hmm. If he can, he put this team on his back against FAU basically, and ran away with the game in the second half, and put the Herd on top. So he's going to have another big game. Not that Isaiah Green isn't capable of leading the Herd to victory, but I think they'll have a much easier time if it's Brendan Knox carrying the workload. Number two, this Herd offensive line is going to have to find a way to nullify D'Angelo Malone. If they try to go one-on-one with him all game long, it's not going to happen. He's going to get to Isaiah Green. It's going to happen. Nobody has been able to keep him from living in the backfield. Actually, he and Jawan Jones have been living in the backfield all season long. And it may benefit the Herd that they will play possibly some 3 tight end sets, because it might give them an opportunity to get a chip on D'Angelo Malone or something just to slow him down a half a step in order to give Isaiah Green that extra second for a play to develop and get a pass off. Isaiah Green's not been terribly accurate this season anyway, especially when he's off of his spot. So any amount of time that he can get to let a play develop and to maybe get a better look at a receiver, he's going to need. And if the Herd can't manage to get D'Angelo Malone slowed down, the importance of Brendan Knox having a big game skyrockets. Number 3, to me, this is a really kind of really specific point. I think Xavier Gaines going to have at least 3 catches, 2 rushes, and maybe even throw a pass in order for the Herd to win this game. Doesn't have to be completed necessarily, but I think it's one of those things that you got a player like this that can do all of those things. Why in the hell wouldn't you make the Western Kentucky defensive staff account for every single capability that this kid has? Because he's capable in all 3 of those facets. Run him in the Wildcat a couple of times. Make sure you target him, 5-6 times through the air, and give him an opportunity to throw a pass, man. He's got the talent. You might as well utilize it. Don't leave it sitting on the shelf in a rivalry homecoming game that could decide the conference division. Number 4, Armani Levias, to me, I think he's going to have 7 or more receptions. He's the leading receiver for a reason. He gets open, he catches the ball, and he makes plays. So why use him as a decoy? Make him the primary target. He deserves it. He's shown he can handle it. Number 5, I think the Herd is going to have to score in all 4 quarters in order to win this game. We've seen them not show up more often than not in the third quarter of games. They've done a better job the past few weeks since conference play has opened, but I need to see more. They got 5 points in the third quarter against FAU. Now, granted, one was a big safety and the other was a field goal, but you can't take the third quarter off offensively without putting points on the board. Yeah, I get field goals are offensive points, but you know what I mean. You need touchdowns. You need legitimate points. You can't have a team come out of the locker room and think, well, the Herd's not very good in third quarter. This is where we make our move. And then number 6, here's the team concept point of victory. The Herd's going to have to, number 1, answer the bell. They're going to have to come out fired up and ready to play. And number 2, they're going to have to shake the cobwebs because they will get punched in this game. If they are unable to shake the cobwebs out and play Herd football, it's a wrap. If they get punched that first time or they go down a couple scores and don't respond, it's over. We saw them do a good job of that against FAU. They went down 14-3 and managed to come back and win that game. And that showed a lot of resiliency. We saw that against Ohio University. The Herd needed to come back and win that game, and then they needed to be able to close it out. And they did that. So they need to be able to answer the bell, and they need to be able to shake the cobwebs in order to win this game. It's going to be physical. It's a rivalry game. There are going to be unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. It's going to get chippy, and it's going to get chippy early. I can almost guarantee it. We've seen it every time these two teams have locked horns. And there's no reason to believe that it's not going to happen this time. Now we have played enough Moonshine Throwdown games that the seniors that are on these teams have been here for the entire duration of this rivalry. Last year's seniors were the first class to have played all 4 years of the Moonshine Throwdown, and now this is just commonplace. These guys don't know any other. It's not just, we're playing Marshall. They know it's a rivalry game. So you're going to see it play out that way. So now that I've given you my points, you've given me your points. You tell me why exactly the Herd will win the 2019 Moonshine Throwdown.
Well, I actually wrote down 4 things for that. If that works, I don't know, but I wrote down 4 things for that.
It's your answer, boss. Whatever you want to say.
I just wanted to get a little more detail on there for that. I'm not one of those people that likes to declare wins or whatever, but for this purpose of this segment, of course, I think Marshall will win because I think they're playing with more confidence now. It's like I said after the FAU wrap-up episode. I said I think that's going to be huge for their confidence. I think Marshall's going to come in now. They're going to be feeling good. I mean, for the first time in a few weeks, I think they're going to legitimately feel like they can beat anybody on any given game or day or night or whatever. I think that's to the point that FAU game could lead to some stuff like that. Just more confidence, because it's like I said, I think the last 2 or 3 weeks, they've kind of been a little bit, wishy-washy, a little bit kind of, up, not really down, but kind of just in the middle. Like they haven't really been that fired up. I don't feel like, I mean, they've kind of just felt a little lethargic maybe, but like their mood and stuff. So I think it's going to be, the FAU game's going to be huge for that. And I think that's going to really carry over into this game. And then my next thing I wrote down for that is Marshall's at home. I think that's, I mean, we all know their home record is not, their home dominance is not what it used to be, obviously. I mean, for their first 13, 14 years in that stadium, they only lost 7 home games. So it's not that anymore, but it's still a formidable task for a team to go in there and win, especially in Conference USA. I mean, just over the last decade, Marshall's 47-18 at home. I mean, including this season. I mean, 47-18 is pretty good. That's compared to 28-37 on the road. So I mean, Marshall just plays better at home. I mean, I think that's always been the case. I think that helps. I mean, if this game was in Bowling Green, I would be a lot more worried than I am. Not that I'm not worried, of course, but like I would probably pick Western if this was in Bowling Green. And not to give a spoiler there, but I'm just saying that would be a lot tougher task. And then I also wrote down Western Kentucky's only scored 30 points one time this season. Now I know that their offense is getting better, and I know that they've had some issues and quarterback change and whatever, but that's not that impressive. I mean, Marshall's offense, we know how inconsistent they've been this year, but they've scored 30 plus 4 times. Western just hit 30 against Charlotte, and they needed 2 trick play touchdowns to get 30 points against the 128th ranked scoring defense in college football out of 130 teams. Just saying. I mean, I'm not trying to like crap on the Western's offense or anything, and it's not that I don't think they're capable. It's just, I mean, really, they're not that great, I don't think. No offense, but like, I think that plays into Marshall's hands, so we'll see. And then I think my last point that I wrote down why they will win is this might be my biggest proclamation. Marshall will out physical Western Kentucky in this game. I think they will do it. I think I'm not going to say they're going to own the trenches like they did against FAU, but I think that they will out physical them. I think that that's going to go a long way in getting the win. So I think that will happen, honestly. I really think so.
Well, I wish, as Steven joins the broadcast, ladies and gentlemen, he's here. You're going to get your Western Kentucky fix. It won't just be Trace all damn day long. He's here. I wish he would have joined the broadcast about a minute earlier, because I would have loved for him to hear what you just said. But he's going to have to wait until that gets posted, because he's really going to love that. I wish he'd have heard that in real time. I don't think he would have been able to stay quiet. So
it was just facts. I mean, I'm just saying. just facts. All right, there then. All right. Well, Steve, we're glad you made it. I'm glad you were able to get on the show here, because this is not one we wanted you to have to miss. I mean, we've got a lot going on, and I want to bring you up to speed a little bit. You know, we've covered the history of the game. We've talked about stats. We've talked about a ton of players to look out for. And what I want to do is back up just a little bit. And, I know you didn't listen to the exact guys that I said to look out for, but you're on the podcast every week or most weeks. You know who the usual suspects are for the Herd. So what I asked Trace earlier was,
if you were a Hilltopper fan, who would you be most worried about on this Marshall team? And I want to ask you the same thing. If you were a Herd fan, who should you be most worried about on this Hilltopper team? Offense or defense, who should they really be paying the most attention to in this game?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few guys that come to mind in both sides of the ball. The obvious choice is D'Angelo Malone on the defensive line. I mean, he's going to be chasing Xavier Green, whether he ever gets to him or not, I don't know. Or if they decide to double him, that's just going to open a lane for somebody else to get to him. So that's the obvious choice. I mean, he's leading the conference, in tackles for loss and sacks, I do believe, and near the top in both of those categories. So he's the obvious choice. The offensive side, I mean, I think Ja'Cour Pearson has kind of emerged as the most consistent wide receiver threat. He's kind of that over-the-middle slot receiver kind of guy that once he gets an open space, he's dangerous. Lucky Jackson's had a few games where he's kind of starting to put together a little streak of making some plays for us after having a kind of a rough outing to begin the season. And then on the running side, if we get Gage Walker going, if that offensive line starts getting pushed, I think that'll be one of the biggest battles in the games, O-line versus D-line. But if they start getting pushed, then Gage Walker, might really try to control the clock and keep the ball out of your hands so we can score more points. And then Josh Simon, he's kind of that red zone target. I think, at one point, 4 of his 6 catches were for touchdowns. He's kind of that go-to playmaker in the red zone if we get close to the end zone, where we're going to be looking to put 6 on the board instead of kicking 3. So that would be kind of a handful of guys that I would definitely watch out for. Some of them are new names to some Marshall followers that might not follow us every single week. And then, guys like Lucky Jackson, he's been around doing it for a while. Ty Story is kind of emerging as a back. He a little bit dual threat. I don't want to call him dual threat, but he's got the ability to run. And I know the Herd has been run on a little bit this year by a mobile quarterback, so he could be kind of versatile in that role if he needs to be. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think those guys definitely will all make an impact in some way.
First of all, quick copy in my paper because you have seriously mentioned just about everybody I ran down, and you were even took it a step further to say you don't consider Ty Story a, quote, dual threat quarterback. I said the exact same thing, but he will bust off a run on you. So now let me flip the script on you just a little bit. Just like the usual suspects for the Herd, who is the one guy that concerns you the most in this matchup with the Hilltoppers, considering everything that we know about both teams? Who's the guy, offensive or defensive or whatever? Who's that one guy that the Hilltoppers, in your opinion, should really, really pay attention to?
I mean, honestly, I can't narrow it down to just one. I have to say at least 3.
Okay.
At least 3 guys I have to mention because I've watched several Marshall games this year. So I've got a little context and not just our stats that we rattle off for each game. The first one is Brendan Knox. A very good downhill runner, explosive. Seems like he gets stronger as the game goes on, which Western's had a few of those backs in their history, and those are scary because the D-line starts getting tired, and he's still chugging along, pulling off some big chunk plays. I know he kind of started off slow against FAU, but then he finished off that game just, 200-something yards, 220, something like that. So
yeah.
Killer game, a lot of momentum. Not going to be surprised if they ride him. Then you have to mention both tight ends. I mean, you have to mention Xavier Gaines, even though he's sort of been inconsistent. He's still a threat in multiple ways, whether he's throwing, catching, whatever. He's that X-man that can line up and do a lot of things, be very versatile. And then Marnie Levias, right? I mean, he's he's a bowling ball. I mean, he's a not. I know I've called Ja'Cour Pearson that. Ja'Cour is like a pinball. Elias is like a bowling ball, man. He's wrecking people when he gets the ball and got a little bit of space and open field. He's going to run you over. So, it's going to be tough covering 2 tight ends plus having a versatile back like Knox. I think some of those guys could cause mismatches. They're going to make some plays. I mean, you're not going to shut all those people down. The best thing we can hope to do is keep Xavier Gaines on the run and making poor decisions. That's the best thing we can hope for. So, but definitely all 3 of those guys. Can't name just one. I have too much respect for the Herd team to just name one, so sorry.
Well, that's all right. I mean, I know you had some fans might have got a little confused there with that last comment. You said keep Xavier Gaines on the run. I know you meant Isaiah Green. That's okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's okay. I'll just clarify that so folks aren't like, what? But one other thing I want to get your opinion on before we can move on here and allow you to tell us what the Tops are going to need to do to get a win is I asked Trace, I told Trace, you are a lot like him in the fact that you have been here from the beginning. You remember you were one of my probably first followers of the account when we were really just trying to get the ball rolling on this thing. So you've seen it grow. You've seen where what it's turned into from just a fan perspective, not from a podcast co-host perspective, just from a fan perspective. Talk to me about what this game has become, what it is. Maybe if it's as important now or more important now than it was. I mean, what is the Moonshine Throwdown to you from a fan perspective from where it was at the end of that game in 2014 when we were so abruptly introduced to each other as Herd and Hilltopper teams?
Yeah, I mean, what I remember 2014, obviously we were fairly new to Division I football, 5 years in, unknown team, not a lot of success in our history. But that year we had just a hot football team. I mean, our offense was, probably top 10, top 5 nationally. I know you all were in that same boat, had very good offense and defense. So we clashed. Obviously, there was an upset that happened. The interesting thing about that game is I was at work during that game. I didn't get to watch that game live. And I just remember checking the score, and we were up by like 2-3 touchdowns. And I was like, oh, what in the world's going on here? And then I checked my phone later, and it's overtime and how it ended. I never watched the recording of the game until the off season right before last season started. I watched a replay of the game on YouTube, and I was just like, oh my God, this had to be an amazing football game ever to attend or to watch live, because it was just fireworks everywhere. I mean, who doesn't want to go watch 130 plus points between 2 teams being scored? Amazing. But then since then, obviously there was kind of disrespect thrown back and forth both ways because, Marshall back then, they used to play for championships and they threw that in our face, and Western got to play the underdog role and ruin their perfect season. Kind of began that way disrespectfully to each other. And but then as it's grown now, Western had success, won a couple conference championships. We've got to know each other now as fan bases. And now I think Western respects the Herd's consistent success, I guess. I mean, that should be something that every G5 team wants to emulate. You want to be consistently competitive and getting bowl games, competing for conference championships. And we know that's something we haven't achieved yet. We were there for a short period, but then we fell off. So it's kind of more from, an underdog upset thing to disrespect to now we've kind of earned the respect because, we earned it by winning some games. and now it's gone back and forth. And the Marshalls had the upper hand for the last couple of years, but the games have been pretty interesting every year. Last year coming down to basically the last play of the game with the strip sack fumble. So it's been interesting to watch it grow from us being unknown to now respected and in the conversation of contending for the East title every year. Hopefully, that's what we want to do, and both of us are going to be in each other's way if that's going to happen. So it's a fun rivalry, and it's respectful on both sides, from what I see. So that kind of makes it fun when you can interact and get along with people, hang out, when y'all come to Bowling Green or when I come to Marshall, wanting to see those people. So it's just cool. It's fun to be a part of.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I don't know exactly how to put it. There's always going to be a certain level of shade being tossed. There's going to be a certain level of smack being talked, and that's needed for a healthy, good, intense rivalry. You have to have that. You just can't hug each other and then go play football and then hug each other again. You have to want to beat this team, your rival, as badly as you don't want to lose to them. It has to be that way. And by and large, a lot of the smack talk that we see or hear or I see comes from the younger fan base, the students, and that's fine. That's awesome. You need that because they turn into longer fans of a rivalry. Now, the older fans, the ones that have historically been, locking horns with Middle Tennessee and treat the 100 Miles of Hate as their primary rival, we've started to get more of those on board with the idea of Marshall as a rival. And a lot of them have said over the years, hey, I kind of enjoy beating Marshall a little bit more than I enjoy beating Middle Tennessee now. Because simply stated, this game means a little bit more in the standings from time to time. Middle Tennessee still has not won a conference title in the Conference USA, and I'm not trying to take shots at them, but facts are facts. Between us, we've won 3. And, Middle gave one away last year. So I don't think it's any accident that we try to make it fun. We try to keep it interesting. I'm on social media every day, pretty much trying to build and grow. And you guys do a great job on this podcast of bringing great information to people and keeping them engaged and intrigued. And, we try our best to make this must listen radio or podcasting. But I got to ask you, Steve, is this truly a circle it on the schedule game? I mean, I like to think it is, but in your opinion, is it really a we've got to beat Marshall game?
I mean, you always want to, when your schedule comes out, you always want to beat the best teams on your schedule, and you're going to play some P5s every year. But, in conference, you want to beat the people that are going to be competing for the conference championship. And year in and year out, since 14, minus the 2016 3-9 season, that has been, Marshall. And every coach we've had come through the door since 14 has always echoed that sentiment that, you guys are consistently at the top of the standings. And if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. So, if we want to be considered, the top team in the East or one of the top G5s or, however big you want to look at it, yeah, I think every year you have to circle that game and say, hey, we want to win that game. And then there's always that added intensity that, there's been some chippiness between the teams. There's smack talk online. There's, the close loss last year. This year it's looking like a revenge tour. Western surely remembers how that game ended last year, getting so close and then coming up so short. So, yeah, I mean, I guarantee you this game's circled. Even if they just say, hey, it's next game, next game's the biggest game. I guarantee since that schedule's come out they're ready for that payback victory. There's no doubt about it that they want to win that game every year.
Yeah, you can't, as a coach, come out and say, oh, yeah, we circle that one. You can't. You just can't. We don't live in that world anymore. But, yeah, I like to think that you go down and find out who you're playing when, and you're like, all right, we got to win that one. We got to win that one. And Marshall and Middle Tennessee have to be circled on the Western calendar every year. And I am sure that Western gets circled on the Marshall calendar every year, especially by fans. They got to look forward to it. I know they do. So let me talk to you a little bit about some specifics here. Now, we're going to bring you back up to speed. The listeners already know we all agreed that when we gave our points to victory, we weren't going to cop out this week, and we weren't going to have any of those no turnovers, play clean ball, yada, yada, yada. We wanted specifics. We wanted our listeners to get treated to a really good in-depth analysis of what our opinions of what these teams need to do to win. So Trace gave us 6 great points. I followed up with my 6 points of what the Herd has to do to win. Now it's time for you to tell us what Western Kentucky is going to have to do to win this game. Now, before you get going, we have been not really leaning on the fact that we're expecting temps in the upper 60s and a 70% chance of rain. I looked at the forecast earlier. It's supposed to rain around noon, but be dry for the game and then rain again after the game. But we're taking into account the potential of rain during the game in a wet field. So I don't know if that'll change your train of thought, but it definitely played into a factor into what we had to say about the Herd. So what do the Tops have to do to come to Huntington, spoil homecoming, continue the revenge tour, go to 5-0 in conference, and essentially sew up the East?
I don't have these written down, but
That's all right.
You know me, I don't have them written down, but we have got to get 3 or more sacks on Xavier Gaines or
Isaiah Green.
I don't know why I keep saying Xavier Gaines. I don't have any notes written down. Why do I keep saying Xavier Gaines?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because you are Monstradamus and you're seeing what the rest of the world isn't seeing. So maybe he's going to go throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns in relief of an early injured Isaiah Green. We don't know.
That'd be wild. But like I said last year when we played, I mean, when I watch Marshall football, if you keep him off his spot and make him run and throw, your likelihood of mistakes, turnovers greatly increases. So I think we have to keep Isaiah Green on the run, running for his life. And obviously we want to get to him several times. It's going to increase the likelihood of flipping the ball back to our offense or turnovers via fumble or interception coming our way. So we definitely need to get 3 or more sacks on Isaiah Green. That said, we also need to limit Brendan Knox to under 100 yards rushing. Big task because that guy is a tough runner. The offensive line is always stout. And I would like to think our run defense has been a strength, especially in conference play. So we must hold Knox under 100 yards. That being said, I would like to see Gage Walker go over 100 yards. I'd actually like to see him have his highest rushing output of the season, which I think was UCA in the 150 area. I would love to see him kind of piggyback and just have the biggest game, especially if it's going to be wet. There's going to be not a lot of throwing, sloppy play, wanting to grind the time of possession, and keep the ball out of your offense's hands. You can't score and beat us if we're holding the ball like we did against Army. Let's see, I'd like to see Ty Story make plays not only in the air. I'd like to see him have a similar game to what he did last time out, where he had 200-plus yards throwing, but then he also had 50-plus yards rushing. I'd like to see him do something like that again, where he has over 300 yards of total offense, passing and rushing, just where he's effectively making plays both ways. I know the Marshall defense has been accruing a lot of sacks, so if there's pressure coming off the edge, he needs to feel has the leeway to take off and run. Whether that's designed runs or just a play breaks down and he takes off and scampers and gets yards. Not going to take a cop out and say we need to win the turnover battle. We need to continue to play clean ball, limit our penalties, and we need to win the turnover battle by 2. I mean, we need to have 0 turnovers. We need to create 2 turnovers, and we obviously need to score points both times, and preferably we need to score 6. I mean, we have been kicking a lot of field goals. We really need to be under 3 field goals kicked. We need to have at least 2, if not 3 touchdowns scored. I don't see it being a high-scoring game. I think that's kind of a consensus among this group is it's not going to be 66, 67. It's not going to be in the 40s. I think it might be a grinding game. So we've got to finish every drive that we have with 6. I think every point is going to count. And it could come down to the wire.
Well, you are kind of spot on. I don't know exactly how much the weather is going to play into the game. Of course, we are speaking as though there's going to be just a super wet field, but after looking at the forecast and thinking, well, it might be a little wet, maybe a little slippery, but ultimately it may be decent passing conditions come game time. So for me, my number 1 point for the Tops to win this game, and I really wish you'd quit copying my paper. Number 1, Ty Story's got to go over 300 yards of offense, and I don't know if that's passing or rushing combined, but he needs to top the 300-yard mark, and he needs to find the end zone a combination of 3 times in order for the Toppers to get a win. Number 2, you said sacks on Isaiah Green. I say they need to get at least 5, and I think they're fully capable of doing that, especially if the Herd cannot meet my number 2 point, which is find a way to nullify D'Angelo Malone. Number 3 for me, I think the Toppers need to have 2 either wide receivers or a combination of wide receivers and tight ends to go over 100 yards on the day. Spread the ball around, share the wealth, and keep this Herd defense from being able to focus on any one receiver because we know there are holes in the Herd pass defense. Number 4, I think Ja'Cour Pearson's going to have a big game in the yaks department. I'd like to see him have 80-plus yaks against the Herd. I think that's a real point of emphasis. If they can get him in space, that usually lends itself to success and points for the Hilltoppers. So if Pearson can get 80-plus yaks throughout the day, I think that's a very good key to victory and a good indicator that the offense is rolling for Western Kentucky. And number 5, I had to throw this one in there because I love mentioning this point, and that I think the Toppers have to be the team that wins the hidden 10 minutes in this game. We talked earlier before you joined the broadcast about the Herd's woes in the third quarter, and if they can't get that fixed or continue to get that fixed a little bit this week, and that allows the Western to score maybe right before half and then come right back out and score again and maybe get a 14-point swing in the game. That's going to be huge. So winning the hidden 10 minutes may be a critical factor for Western Kentucky. And number 6, this is my kind of team overall kind of thing. I think they need to start fast. I think they need to quiet this homecoming crowd that will probably be a little raucous from some early morning tailgating. And I think they need to weather the storm. And I don't mean that about the potential rainfall. They will be faced with a flurry by the Herd. Marshall tends to score, 2 or 3 times in a row and then not do anything for a while. They need to be able to weather that storm and not go down 21-0 or, 28-3. And if they can do that, if they can hang around, if they can go punch for a little while and then ultimately make a play to put themselves ahead, then I think that's exactly what's going to have to happen for the Toppers to come into Huntington and leave victorious and get bowl eligible and put a real chokehold on the East Division. So, Steve, this is the last thing I want to ask you about in this segment. I asked Trace. You gave me your points. You listened to my points. Now I want you to tell me specifically why Western Kentucky will go into Huntington and they will win the game. What is it about this team that gives them the edge?
Well, I've said this, every wrap up and preview that, the offense is starting to click. They're putting it together. Ty Story has progressed every single game. There's been several games where I've kind of undersold the defense on what I've expected them to do. They're only giving up 11 points per conference game. My score prediction isn't going to reflect that. I think Marshall has the ability and can and will score more points than that. But I also think if their defense comes in and does what I know they're capable of doing, that my score prediction could be way wrong. I mean, we could have us a good victory, a nice revenge tour victory. So, I think our defense is going to surprise and do what they do. And then I think our offense is going to continue to improve and adapt and, maybe not get to the 30-point mark, but I think, they're going to stay on the field, hold the ball, extend drives, especially on a potentially wet field or maybe a rainy game. And I think they're just going to show that next step of improvement and, hopefully put another win in the column and really look strong in the East and go 5-0. They're enjoying the underdog role, not favored to win. I think that's what they're going to do.
All right. Gotta like their chances. You got like either team's chances, really. This is maybe the most evenly matched these two teams have been in the series of this rivalry game. Generally, there's a clear-cut favorite. They were pretty evenly matched in 2017, fairly evenly matched in 2018, but this season they really look like a mirror image of one another. So let's talk about 200 proof players, guys. Let's get Trace back in here now that Steven's caught up to speed. We can progress as a trio. We're going to talk 200 proof players, and again, we're going to up the level a little bit for you guys this week. Generally, they give us one 200 proof player. I've asked the guys to give us two. Give us one on offense and one on defense. So let's start with Trace. Trace, who's your guy for the herd this week? Your guys, offensive and defensive 200 proof players.
Yeah, starting offensively, it's a guy that we've all talked about a lot on this episode, Brendan Knox. I mean, he seems like he's one of the very few consistent, constant factors that always play well on that offense. He seems like he's one of the only few guys that you can consistently count on. Now, there's a few guys in there. Armani Levias is pretty consistent. You can always rely on him, I feel like. And there's other guys in there, especially on the O-line. But, I mean, as far as, like, your favorite term, skill position players, I think by far Brendan Knox is the one that you can trust the most. I've said a lot over the last few days that I think he's Marshall's best running back since Devin Johnson, and I think I just think that's how it is. I mean, there's been some good ones since him, but something about Knox really stands out, and he's a really good player, and I think that he's capable. Obviously, we know he's capable of leading the charge for Marshall's offense, and I think the same could be said for this game if the offensive line helps out as well. Which you can't do one with takes two to tango, and they're going to need both. But Knox, I'm really thinking he's going to have a good game again. And then defensively, I'm going with Devontae Beckett. I mean, I know I said in the group text that we had that he's been the best defensive player Marshall's had this year. I think most anybody would agree with that. I mean, this guy's really, really good. I mean, heading into this season, honestly, he was a little bit of an unknown because, the transfer and you really didn't know what he would bring. But, man, he's bringing it because every week it seems like he's around 10 tackles a game almost every week. I mean, he's just another in a long line of especially recent history, Marshall really good linebackers. I mean, Neville Hewitt won Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year. Evan McKelvey won Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, they've had Chase Hancock and Amari Cobb and a bunch of really good linebackers over the last few years. And I think Beckett's right up there with the rest of them, honestly. So I think defensively, I could see him having a huge game. Probably could lead the herd in tackles in this game. I mean, definitely always the threat to do that. So I really think Beckett's going to ball out defensively like he's been doing all year.
Two excellent players. I'm glad you didn't try to go off the cuff and come pull somebody out of thin air, because these are probably the exact two guys that are going to need to have huge games. So, Steve, who's your guys this week for Western Kentucky, offensively and defensively, for your 200-proof players?
Well, defensively, I don't know. I got to pick one of those 11 guys. Give me D'Angelo Malone. Give me this guy that should be wreaking havoc and demanding double teams and just really, really chasing Isaiah Green off his game. I hope he gets to him several times. I want him to have 2+ sacks. But even if he doesn't get sacks or tackles for loss, if he's moving him out of the pocket and putting pressure on him, I think that could be game-changing for us. And that's kind of what we've done all season, whether we get to him or not, whether he gets double-digit tackles or not. You can affect the game even without putting up big stats. So I think Malone is an obvious choice. It could be someone else statistically that has a big game if it's not him because of the attention he demands. But that's just another, strength of his game, is that it takes more than one person to block him, which could open up for somebody else. So D'Angelo Malone is an obvious person on defense. Then on offense, kind of still riding the quarterback train. I think Ty Story is progressing, very, very well from his first game. He was just kind of a game manager, really limited playbook, safe throws, a lot of scrambles. Some design, some not, but he's really starting to open the playbook up, give him more freedom and control. You can tell he's getting more comfortable. You can tell those repetitions with the first team are really starting to pay off. Some of the bigger throws are hidden. I think, he's going to continue to show that graduate senior leadership. He's played in these big games before. Hopefully it's a tough environment with a loud crowd that shows up for this game. And I think he's going to be unfazed by it. I think he's going to show up, be a dual threat kind of guy if we need him to be, and sustain drives of the legs, and make good throws and good decisions and not turn the ball over. He's been real clean in that aspect, not making any dangerous throws and plays. And, that's what we need. We need somebody that's going to be safe, but still have control of the offense and lead us to victory. So definitely those two guys. I mean, they're consistent. I don't want to call them safe plays, but I think they're almost surely both going to have a huge effect on us winning this game.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that for sure. And you're right. Even if D'Angelo Malone doesn't show up in the stat line, it's because he's being accounted for and allowing somebody else to free up. So I've got a bunch of guys here, and, you guys didn't totally copy off my paper this time, but you came pretty close. So let's just get out of the way the one that you copied off of me, Trace. I, too, think it's going to be Tavante Beckett that has to have the huge day for the Herd. So we're both in agreement there for our 200-proof player on defense. Now, look, I took it just a little bit sideways from where you went with Brendan Knox, and I cheated just a little bit. But I think in order for Brendan Knox to be your 200-proof player, my 200-proof players actually have to come through. So I think it's got to be Levi Brown, Josh Ball, Kane Madden, Will Ulmer, and Alex Millette. The Herd offensive line has to be the guys. You said it takes 2 to tango. It actually takes 6 to tango. And it's going to be a huge factor in the success that the Herd may or may not have, is if these guys can control the line of scrimmage and push it back at the snap. So give me those 5 guys and anybody else that has to sub in relief. For the toppers, I'm with you, Steven. We're like-minded with Ty Story has to be the guy. This is a good setup, good week for him to get over the hump, if there is a hump, and just kind of show what he can actually do. I think there's going to be a little bit more opening of the playbook and maybe another chance or two taken. So far, everything they've tried has seemed to work. So why not stretch it a little bit further and see exactly what he can do in a big game. This is not necessarily a must win, but it's a damn, we sure would like to win this one and go ahead and get bowl eligible and stranglehold the Conference USA East race. Defensively, I'm going off of the fact that I think Marshall is going to make a serious effort to keep D'Angelo Malone off of Isaiah Green. And I do know that Jawan Jones will make plays in his own right, but give me Coco Darden as my 200-proof player for the simple fact that he plays in the backfield. He plays around the line of scrimmage. He's making sideline-to-sideline tackles, and he can play coverage. I think he's going to have a huge game being freed up a little bit because I think an extra man will have to pay attention to D'Angelo Malone almost all game long. So now the big one, guys. You know when it's Moonshine Throwdown week, I always take this week off for score predictions, and I'm going to hold true to that again. So give me your score predictions for the 2019 Moonshine Throwdown. Trace, we'll start with you.
Well, sorry for the pause there. No, I was going to say, if you all saw, or if anybody saw on Twitter, the Towel Racks article that was talking about the Moonshine Throwdown, it had us on there or whatever. I actually put my score prediction in that, so hopefully not too many people listening read that. Yeah, but I'm going to say it anyways. I'm going to say Marshall gets the win here, 24-16. I think and the reason I say 16 is a point that Stephen actually brought up earlier, I think, is talking about how Western has to kick a lot of field goals. Well, I think Marshall's red zone defense is going to really play well. I think they're going to hold them to, well, I guess that'd be 3 field goals. I think they're going to bend a little bit, but I think ultimately they're not going to break a lot. I think they're going to hold them to field goals and make it, they're not going to let them get in the end zone. And I think that that's going to be a huge difference in the game. I don't think either offense is daunting by any means. I think both offenses aren't exactly the greatest thing since sliced bread or any, but I mean, there's both sides have talent offensively, but it's just a lot of it's kind of inconsistent, especially for Marshall. But I said all week and heading into it, I think this is going to be a lower scoring kind of grinded out game like it was last year. And I think that's going to come true because, I mean, the weather conditions could play a role. You never know what will happen there. Hopefully it doesn't rain during the game, but if it does, I think it's going to definitely be low scoring then because it's going to be tougher for those offenses to get going. But I'm going to say Marshall wins 24-16 and, well, covers, I guess.
All right. Well, Trace doesn't like anybody to crack 30, so I wonder if Steven does. Steve, what do you got for the 2019 Moonshine Throwdown?
First of all, I don't know what the stakes need to be, but if y'all hold us to 16 points, I don't know. Well, let's figure out the stakes. If y'all hold us to 16 points, I'm going to do something wild involving ripping some herd green for y'all. I don't know what I'll do, but I think we score more than 16 points. That's all I'm going to say. 1 touchdown and 3 field goals. Yeah. Yeah, I think we score that. My score prediction is 27-24 Toppers. I think we win. I think it could be a close game, but like I mentioned earlier, I think I also may sell our defense short, and they may come in and just put up another spectacular outing like they've been doing all season. And could surprise us and come away with a bigger victory than that. If they're playing that type of game, I think the offense won't feel the need to come out and chuck the ball all over the place. I think they'll play ball control and milk the clock. And, even if they are being successful moving the ball, I think they'll just play keep away and try to run the clock out. So I think we win, and, not being a homer in any way, shape, or form, being an informed citizen, having watched both teams play, that's truly how I feel. I think the revenge tour factor, I think, knowing how both teams played last year, I think WKU has improved more than Marshall has from last year, and even from looking at this season. I think we win. I think I won't be surprised when we win. And I think if I'm there, I know we are undefeated when I'm in Huntington, West Virginia, and we play. So I hope I get to make the trip, because then it's a wrap. I know we're
it's a done deal. As soon as Steven crosses the state line, it's over. You might as well not even play the game. I'm sorry. My favorite part of that whole thing was, first of all, that was good.
First of all, how are you going to say first of all and then only give them 11 more points than what I said they were going to get? Like, ew. Like, if you're going to say that, give them 45 or something.
Well, look, it's been everywhere I've read, nobody really likes either team to crack 30. I don't think I've seen one score prediction from any outlet. Fans, yeah, I mean, they get a little ridiculous with it, 99 to nothing and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think any outlet that I've read has either team going over 30. So 21 points could win this game, especially if it's nasty. But 30 points, I think, is going to win this game. Now, it's a rivalry game. You toss it all out the window. We think we have a great idea of what's going to happen and what might go on. And then, 67, 66 happens. Now, nobody thinks that that's going to happen again this year. But is it out of the question for it to be a 38 to 31 game or a 38 to 35 game? No, because trick plays can happen, fluke plays, pick sixes, scooping scores, whatever. But I think 30 points wins this game. I wish I don't wish. I can't wait to see it play out. So hang with us. On the other side of this break, we're going to close out the episode with a little bit of travel info for anybody that may be coming to Huntington to watch the game. We're going to give you some good places to eat. Trace will give you one or two of his favorite places around Huntington if I don't mention them on my list. And maybe if you're spending the night, some places where you can go get yourself a cocktail, depending on what type of clientele you would like to be around, whether you are a college-age student or an adult. So hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
Play action, White, far side, picked off. This is going to be a pick six.
And just as I open my big mouth, you get Nazee Johnson going ahead and jumping that route, throwing the ball across the field. Mike White, you got to have a lot of arm strength to go ahead and complete that throw.
Pick six, and that's going to be Johnson's first interception as a college football player for the redshirt freshman.
What a great play by Johnson. You see Johnson dropping back into coverage, spinning his head around once he sees the wide receiver wide open the way he was, and going ahead and jumping that route. I'm sure Mike White didn't see him over there either.
All right, welcome back. Final segment of this epic, almost 2 hour, if not 2 hour, Moonshine Throwdown preview. We have been rolling this evening. Let's get a little bit of travel info for visiting fans, those that may not have made a trip to Huntington or some that may be looking for some new things to do as you make the trek. I hope a ton of you come because we'd really like to see a fair amount of red represented at Joan C. Edwards Stadium. I think the last time I was there, there weren't a whole lot of fans that made the trip, but it was late in the season, maybe November, and cold and, not that pleasant. So a little bit more fair weather this time, pushing 70, might be a little wet, but that shouldn't stop you from coming. So let's talk about some places you can come and get some tailgating spots, at least close to the stadium. I've seen a lot of folks. I asked for some advice, and by and large, a lot of what I got was first come, first serve parking at Arby's and Captain D's right on Fifth Avenue, which is right across the street from the Joan C. Edwards Stadium. I mean, it's like less than a half a block walk. You could literally hit the stadium with a rock if you park there. And then, of course, on down 3rd Avenue, which is on the north side of the stadium, Marshall has its own lots kind of down past the Cam Henderson Center if you've been there for a basketball game. Not sure how much it costs to park in those places, but those are places that are relatively close. As far as some restaurants that you want to hit up, I think everybody that has come from Western Kentucky at least once knows about Fat Patty's. That's right there by the stadium. I would count on that place being packed, especially since it's homecoming and there will be a fairly large crowd. So some other spots you might want to look for right across the stadium along 3rd Avenue, there's a Mexican place called El Ranchito that I hear good things about. A lot of folks mentioned that when I asked for places to eat. Of course, if you want some, Marshall themed flair, there's the Marshall Hall of Fame Cafe on further down 3rd Avenue at Pullman Square, where there's several restaurants and shops and stuff like that. But the MU Cafe is pretty cool. There's a lot of memorabilia and stuff in there from historic Marshall teams. Randy Moss's Bolitnikoff Award is in there. So I think there's also some memorabilia from the We Are Marshall movie there. At least there was. I don't know if it's still there. Probably the most well-known restaurant in the city of Huntington is Jim's Spaghetti. It's been there like since they laid the bricks in the first streets of Huntington. It's got a lot of good food there. Of course, get the spaghetti. Historic place to eat. I think the story goes that John Kennedy ate there. I believe there's a booth that marks like sit where Kennedy sat. So you can do that if you're in the mood for some spaghetti. I did get one note that fine dining, as far as fine dining goes, if that's what you're into, there's a place called 21. And then Savannah's. I have never eaten at either one of those places, but if you're into fine dining, might want to give those places a look-see. Do not know if they require reservations or not, being that it's homecoming, and if they do, that might be a tough place to get a seat in, but it's worth looking. How about some bars? I got 4 that kept getting mentioned to me. That's the Union Pub and Grill for, pretty much anybody that's college age up to, it's a youthful crowd. We'll put it that way. They won't tell you anybody can't go in there, but it's a youthful crowd. I imagine that place will be elbow to elbow. It's one of the more popular bars in Huntington. Picture Hilligan's on homecoming. That's what you're in for if you go to the Union. It'll be hard to get through, and there'll probably be a line out the door. St. Mark's was another place that was mentioned to me. It's all these places, I believe, are on 4th Avenue. So, if you hit one and it's full, just walk a little bit farther and you'll hit another one. St. Mark's, Hanks was mentioned to me as a place for a little bit of an older crowd. If you don't want, the super loud music and all that kind of stuff, if you want a decent place to just chill and have a drink. And then the Premier Pub and Grill came across my timeline as the bar in Huntington is refusing to sell Kentucky bourbon this weekend because we're playing Western Kentucky in the Moonshine Throwdown. I love the pettiness there. That's kind of like, Ohio State crossing out all the M's when it's Michigan week. I love the pettiness there, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just think that's one of those cool things. Some sites that you might want to take in, of course, tour campus. It's a pretty campus. You're going to want to stop by the Memorial Student Center Plaza and get a look at the Memorial Fountain. If you would really like to take your trip to the next level, travel up 20th Street to Spring Hill Cemetery. You can follow the signs to the Marshall Memorial at Spring Hill Cemetery, where the I don't know what you call it. I guess the plane crash memorial is, where the 6 players are buried together, the ones that could not be identified. It's really a nice memorial. It gets visited a lot by opposing fans, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people there because it's homecoming. If you're in and around the stadium area and you don't really want to go driving anywhere, the Hurd Hall of Fame at the Chris Klein Athletic Complex should be open and available for you to go in and peruse. It's free. There's no admission whatsoever. Just walk in and check some things out. And if you're into this sort of thing, at 10:30 in the morning, Marshall will be holding an official groundbreaking ceremony for the new baseball stadium that's being built. So that'll be a cool kind of once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing that you could do. But aside from that, Trace, if you've got any restaurants or tailgating spots that you'd like to mention real quick before we get into final thoughts, go ahead and toss those out. And then we will wrap it up this week.
Yeah, I'll be honest. There's not really many more restaurants that I could list. I appreciate the thoroughness there, because that really is a really good outlook of what Huntington has to offer. There's a couple places that I was thinking about, which are not really. Well, one of them is a pretty big deal now because they don't sell them at the games anymore. But Stewart's Hot Dogs, down the road there. That's an interesting little story in its own right. That's a Huntington staple. I mean, that's been there forever. Everybody knows Stewart's hot dogs in Huntington. That's, nobody knows it at the Marshall games anymore, but that's a whole separate issue. But and then of course there's the fast food restaurants. I mean, there's always the generic fast food restaurants that are in everywhere if you're into that. But Red Lobster's there, it's good. I mean, there's a lot of good places. Pullman Square's got some good stuff. But I mean, as far as like tailgating though, like there's infinite places you can tailgate down there. I mean, tailgating is a really big deal in Huntington. Like if you would just go around the town during Marshall home games and just look at all the people that are set up tailgating, you would think they have 50, 60,000 people every game. Like that's how many people it looks like are tailgating. Like you would think that's a huge stadium with a huge amount of people every week because of how many people that tailgate. But you can pretty much set up anything anywhere. That's what I've gathered over the years. I mean, of course, like the main lots in the stadium are, for certain people and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you can tailgate basically anywhere. A lot of good eating places, and there's a lot to do. I mean, as far as that goes. So if you're coming in for the first time, you'll have a lot to choose from. And like I really liked all the places you said, the potential places you could visit. Those are really good places I would recommend. I remember a few years ago when I went up to the cemetery once, and like I remember there was a couple things that was the season that Marshall hosted Louisville with Lamar Jackson, and there was a Louisville thing there from a fan that left that on the memorial, and then there was a thing from Charlotte when Charlotte played there. Somebody left a press pass or something. So like that's cool to see opposing team fans and opposing team personnel do that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's a lot to do, especially if you haven't been in Huntington before.
One thing I did fail to mention as far as restaurants go, and being that this is an early game, and if some of you are coming in Friday night so that you don't have to get up super early and drive from Bowling Green, make the 5-hour trek, you'll be there for breakfast. And if you go to Huntington and it's breakfast time and you don't go to Tudor's Biscuit, you have cheated yourself. Make sure you go to Tudor's Biscuit World. There's one right there by the stadium along 20th Street, literally a block from the stadium. And if I'm not mistaken, it's like the original Tudor's Biscuit World, but they're really, really good. It is impossible to go into Tudor's and walk out still hungry. So if you're a fan of good breakfast, that's the spot to hit. So guys, let's talk about final thoughts and let's get out of here, get ourselves rested up. We've got kickoff really, really soon. I've got a flight to catch real soon, like real soon. So I need to get out of here and try to get some kind of sleep. So Trey, start us off. We'll finish off with Steve. Let's get some final thoughts going.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was an awesome episode, pretty epic. I mean, all the in-depth stuff we hit on, all the predictions and all the fine points, and it was really, really well done, I think. Speaking on behalf of everyone here, of course, I hope the listeners enjoy it and everything. It helps them get prepped for a huge game. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, or even before the season started, you didn't really think this game would mean as much as it means now in terms of conference standings. Because preseason, I mean, of course, nobody really gave Western a chance to do anything, and look where they are now. They're a good team that controls their own destiny. And then Marshall, they're the preseason pick to win the East. They've been inconsistent, but they're still in the hunt, obviously. So there's a lot that riding on this game, and like if Marshall can get this win, like I've said a couple times already on other episodes, then they're in really good shape in the East because they would have tiebreakers over both FAU and Western Kentucky if it came down to that. And really the only other team Marshall plays in the East that has even, I think, the slightest chance to even contend in the East is FIU. And like I said, I have not been impressed with them that much this year. So if Marshall can, win this game, then that would be huge moving forward because they have a couple games against the West Division coming up, and that really won't affect them in the East, per se. But so this is a huge game. I mean, every year it seems like it is that way, and this is no exception. So I'm excited for it. Hopefully the weather holds up because when it rains and it's nasty and stuff, of course the crowd's not going to be as good as it should be, even on homecoming. So hopefully the weather's not as big of an issue, but it's going to be pretty epic, I think. Hopefully the Herd wins and make it 3 straight and, contend in the East Division, be in first place. It'll be epic.
Well, sounds good to me. I'll tell you what, the rain won't slow me down. I'm flying in from 1,000 miles away. Come hell or high water, I'm having a good time. I don't care who's there with me. Steve, what you got for us this week?
Yeah, I just hope we don't go into this game and choke, or should I say get choked.
You shouldn't have.
I think, man, I think it's going to be a good game. I really, I think I've stated online, still unsure whether I'm going to get to make the trip, trying to figure that out. But if I do get to go, can't wait to meet a lot of people there. I had several people that have asked from the Marshall side if I'm going to make it. Not sure. Hope I do. But either way, I expect a good game. As far as the team and the rivalry goes, I mean, I respect the Marshall opponent. I'm not going to guarantee a victory, but I am not going to be surprised if we have a convincing victory and continue to shock and surprise some people in Conference USA and in the East. Man, I'm really trying to not get too high on our defense, but they've just been surprising me and taking it a step and a notch higher every single game. And I think defense travels, and I think it could be a beautiful game that Clayton White puts together. His adjustments have been stellar. And Ty Story, Gage Walker, Ja'Cour Pearson, Lucky Jackson. Come on, my boys. Put some big numbers on the board. Let's get a W, man. I really am looking forward to this game. Man, I'm ready.
Well, I too hope you can make it. It'll be really cool to have all three of us at the same place at the same time, since Trace refuses to cross the state lines into Kentucky, apparently.
Don't go there.
It would be really cool to have us all three there at the same time. But I got to say, this whole week, people have been reaching out and offering up, please stop by the tailgate. We'd like to see you guys. We'd like to meet you guys and all that kind of stuff. And I really appreciate that. I just have a lot of fun running this account. All I'm trying to do is make it bigger and better and get more people involved and, shed some light on what really is an awesome matchup year in and year out. And people are just so hospitable. I met some great folks when I went to Bowling Green last year. I know they're making the trip to Huntington this year, and I can't wait to lock horns with those folks again and spend some quality time tailgating and having a good time. And for all the folks that offered, please stop by, have something to eat, have a drink. I'm going to try my absolute best to come and see everybody that I can see. I'm going to be on the lots as early as I possibly can. And, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm in it for the marathon. This is not a sprint to me. So I want to make it the whole day and make sure I meet as many people as I possibly can, because this is so cool to me that people are just I know Marshall fans are historically very, very hospitable. And, so far that they're holding true to that this week. And I can't wait to get there on campus and on the lots and see everybody and meet as many people as I can. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to it for months, and I've been looking forward to the game since basically the final whistle last year, because I knew it was going to be something special again this year. I didn't know it was going to be this special. Didn't know first place in the East was going to be essentially on the line. That just makes it so much better. So I look forward to seeing all you guys on Saturday. It's going to be tough to find everybody, but I'm going to try my best. I really am. So I hope I see you. If I don't see you, don't hold it against me. But if you see a guy walking around in one of those Moonshine Throwdown t-shirts and it's gray, that's me, because I'm the only one that's got one of those. Everybody else's is either red or green. So if you see a gray one, just yell for Katie, because that'll be me. And I'll be glad to come over there and say what's up. Remember, we're trying to get to 2,500 followers before kickoff. We're over 2,400 now, so help spread the word. Get people out there. Get them involved. Get them playing along with all the fun online. We really appreciate it. Subscribe to the podcast if you've managed to endure this 2-hour epic podcast. Maybe we'll even hear it playing at some tailgates, Trace. Wouldn't that be awesome? But
that would be.
Let's get the heck out of here this week. Trace, Steve, damn good episode. Glad everybody could get on. Steve, I hope you can make the trip. Trace will definitely link up on Saturday. But for now, let's get out of here. I got to get in bed. I got a plane to catch. So, all right, let's get out of here this week, guys. I hope we can all make it on Saturday. Steve, take us out.
Go Tops.
Trace?
Go Herds.
We're out of here. We'll see you next week. It's the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast.